All right. Well, I get to do the honor of welcoming our first speaker of this morning, Fire Chief Jason Caughey from the Laramie County Fire Authority in Cheyenne, Wyoming. Chief Caughey has been in the fire service for over 20 years, serving in many capacities from straight state trainer, volunteer firefighter, fire captain, and volunteer fire chief. He has been a fire chief for over 18 years, with most of that time in volunteer and combination fire departments. Chief Caughey is committed to serving both the community and the members of the Laramie County Fire Authority through progressive leadership that focuses on service, ownership, unity, and being progressive. The Laramie County Fire Authority is a combination fire department with 120 members, 10 full-time members, 10 resident firefighters, and 100 volunteer members that protect 25,000 citizens in Laramie County. Through 8 it was a long night. Placed fire stations and over 100 members, the district covers and protects 1,105 square miles, ranging from suburban development to rural ranch land. Chief Caughey has an associate's degree and bachelor's degree from Columbia Southern University in fire science and is currently working on his master's in public administration. Chief Caughey serves on many boards and can be found contributing as an author to Fire Rescue One magazine. So please welcome Chief Caughey.
All right, good morning. How's everybody doing? Good. This is going to be a little different for you today because, one, I'm not going to stand still. So be prepared. I might come close to you. Not that close, like comfortably close. Maybe uncomfortably close to some of you. And two, it's going to be a little bit of interactive, all right? And we're going to take a little journey today to engage your mind, and hopefully by the time I'm done today, one, you allow me out the door without killing me, but two, I challenge you to think about your organization. I challenge you to think about what the future looks like for your organization. And through that process, hopefully, you come to some ideas how to better serve your community and improve some of the challenges that you currently have. Who's struggling with recruitment and retention? Okay? Who's struggling with finances? Who's struggling with equipment purchasing with long delays? We're not going to talk about any of that stuff. What we are going to talk about is how do we honor our traditions and lead change towards the future? And how do we do that with still holding on to our mission center focus of our organizations, the service we provide? So, we're going to take a little journey. Who knows what Sears Roebuck is? Some of you, right? And some of you might have heard this before. Who knows what Amazon is? Okay, all right. If you know, who raised, Tom, you raised your hand about Sears Roebuck. What was Sears Roebuck? Okay, and also what else?
Mail order catalog, yeah.
Okay, started in the late...
One of the original mail orders.
Absolutely. So Sears Roebuck, for those of you who don't know it, because they've been out of business for a few years, or pseudo out of business, started in the late 1800s. From Sears, you could order any place in America, probably even Canada too, anything from toilet paper to a house. Have you ever heard of a Craftsman-style house? Okay, that's Sears. So think about this. If you lived in Circle, Montana, which apparently has a cool rodeo, if you lived in Circle, Montana, you could order a house. Or if you're low on toilet paper because there was a flood coming, or COVID, you could order toilet paper, and it would be delivered to your front door 3, 4, 5, a week later, 2 weeks later. It'd be delivered to you. Who's that sound like? Sounds just like Amazon, right? Okay? So Sears developed retail locations, put stores in the malls, and they grew. They had 3 brands. Anybody know what 3 brand names they had that were synonymous with Sears? Craftsman Tools, okay, number 1. Kenwood or Kenmore Appliances. Kenmore Appliances. Anybody know what the third one was? Marketing doesn't work, but if you grew up a 70s or 80s child, which most of you didn't, there was these ice-cold winter commercials for car batteries called Die Hard. That was their other brand. What brand did Amazon start with? When they first started, what did they sell? Books. What type of books? Physical, hard copy, or paperback physical books, right? What did they transition into next? Online books. Through the reader of a Kindle device. Kindle's an Amazon brand, an Amazon product. So now they started with hard books, right? Physical books. They transitioned to digital books. They created a market using a digital reader called a Kindle, so it opened up a whole new marketplace for them, correct? Okay. How did Amazon deliver books originally? So when they were doing physical hard books, U.S. mail. As they grew, they might have started shipping them through UPS or FedEx. Make sense? So they had to diversify their shipping to meet the needs of their customer. Hold on to that thought for a second, maybe a couple seconds. As Sears grew, and the catalog industry started in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, that catalog would come this thick. And it'd get delivered to your house a couple times a year. There was always a holiday edition, there was a back-to-school edition, there was a spring edition. And it had thousands of products. And they would ship them via U.S. Postal Service or UPS or one of those industries. Many of us use that catalog as our first booster seat to get us up closer to the table, or if you're short driving mom and dad's car to lift you up in there. It was that thick. As Sears got into the 90s and early 2000s, they continued with that same model. You could order off a phone call, dial 1-800-SEARS, and you'd order and place your stuff. At the same time, Amazon was saying, hey, there's this online market that's untapped. For those of you that are young, there was a world before the internet, and it was different then. We used pencils, we used paper, typewriters. So Amazon started delivering a service in a different format. And Amazon saw an opportunity and says, we can move from Kindle digital readers to now starting to carry other things. What do you think the executives at Sears were saying during that process in the mid-90s when things were starting to go online and away from mail order? What do you think Sears executives were saying? Sorry, somebody said it. It's not going to work. Or maybe a term that's somewhat found in the fire service, that's not how we do it. It's not going to work here in Montana. That stuff might work in California or New York or wherever, right? But it's not going to work here. Okay? Ever heard in the fire service, that's not how we do it? Okay? Why do you think those executives were saying that's not going to work for us? It's a fad, it's a trend, that's not here to last. That internet stuff is garbage. Why do you think those executives had that mindset? The mall was the place to go, socially too, right?
And they had bought in, they'd gone out of mail order.
Yeah.
They bought into the concept that the mall was where all commerce was.
Yep. But we saw from the industry that malls were dying. If you think about the mid-90s, malls were starting to die. Malls were transitioning to an open air space instead of closed air space. If you look at your own local communities, you can see that. I lived in Great Falls for a little bit of while. The mall there plummeted, right? Took some new vendors to rejuvenate, but they're still struggling. But why else do you think they said this internet thing isn't going to work? Afraid of change. Afraid of not knowing what they don't know, right? And they know this, but they're afraid to adapt. Yep. So now you move forward a little bit. Sears starts to get in the financial problem. The retail locations start to fail in the late 90s, early 2000s, and into the 2010s. They sell off those 3 brand names to generate cash to keep them going. So they sell the Craftsman brand. Where can you get Craftsman today? Lowe's, Ace Hardware, right? You know who owns Craftsman brand name now? It's not Lowe's or Ace Hardware that own it. They're the supplier. They're the distributor of it. Stanley Tool Company. Do you know who Craftsman's biggest competition was back in the day? Stanley Tool Company. They sold their brand name, their illustrious brand name, to their biggest competitor. Think about that. How much do you think that hurt as an executive, that you're charged with the responsibility of this company and you had to sell that brand name off? They sold off Kenmore to generate cash. All the time, Amazon's doing what? Chugging along and growing and making millions, right? But there's an interesting correlation. So we look at Sears, who's on the decline, failed to change, failed to adapt. Did Sears finally get into the online market? Yep. But they were too late. Did Sears naturally have the normal distribution center and system set up to be able to ship and deliver? Yep. They had regional warehouses, they had regional delivery processes, they had all the things that now Amazon is building. I don't know, is there an Amazon distribution center in Montana? Yeah, they're coming if they're not here. Huge facilities. Sears already had that in place. Take the next step to correlate it to the fire service now. When Amazon started shipping and when Sears shipped, they shipped via UPS or the United States Postal Service. How does Amazon deliver today? A little gray van with a guy or gal in a blue vest, most of it. Some of it still comes USPS, some of it still comes UPS. Why do you think they had to expand into the delivery business? Excuse me?
Keep up with demand.
Huh. Anybody struggling with demand of the fire service and it overworking our personnel and call volume changes and all those things? We heard it during the Emergent Leadership Program. This is the gentleman in here from Helena. He said, I can't keep up. We ran 32 calls in my last shift. Huh. So what's Amazon doing to come up with a plan strategically to address the demand? Changing their delivery model. When you think about that, they're changing their delivery model to be more efficient, effective, and to service their customers better and faster. Aren't those all things we strive to do in the fire service? So now think about this. It's correlated. Waldo, you were around when Ben Franklin was here. You're old enough, aren't you? No, not quite. What was the sole purpose of the fire service when we first started? Fire. Over the years, especially from the 60s and 70s on, what did we start to adopt as a service that we now needed to provide to our community? What are some of the things? Hazmat was one of the first ones, right? National Highway Traffic Safety said we need to start to worry about hazardous materials going around, so fire departments adopted hazardous materials. There was a TV show in the 70s that with Johnny and Gage. What did they introduce to the rest of the American fire service? EMS. Okay, so now we added that on. So, right, so now instead of wearing just a fire helmet, now we're wearing a hazardous material suit. Now we're wearing an EMS stethoscope and nitrile or latex gloves. Back then, latex gloves. What have we adopted since then? Community risk reduction, child seat safety inspections. Who does technical rescue? These are all fun things, right? But it's added to the breadth of a system that was designed to do what? A system that was designed to respond to fires. A system that wasn't designed to do everything else. So we're applying a system that wasn't built for what we do. How many of you run EMS in your organization? How many of you run 80% EMS in your organization? How many of you changed 80% of what you do to achieve the best service you can in the EMS industry, meaning change your staffing model, change your equipment model, change your apparatus model. Let's talk to these guys after, they might give you hints. Most of us haven't changed our service delivery model. Most of us haven't adopted a new focus or design to impact what we do now. Who likes tech rescue? I like tech rescue. How many tech rescue calls do we go on a year? Chief Waldo, how many does Bozeman go on a year? How much time do we spend on it? Oh, yeah. If there's a down moment at the station, what do they want to do? I find our guys hanging off rope. Not that way. I find our guys hanging off rope appropriately a lot. Because it's cool, right? It's fun, it's exciting, it's energetic, it's something different. How much time do we have them spend on engaging in service and customer care and culture and those types of pieces? Very little. So when we look at Sears and we look at Amazon, you'll see that there's a major change difference. And part of that major change difference is this little yellow card. Everybody remember Alan Brunacini? Montana's very connected to Chief Brunacini over the years. If you haven't read any of Chief Brunacini's stuff, please do. Carrying his message forward. Everything that he was saying still fits today. Okay? This little card came from him. As leaders, as we look at traditions and we look at change, it's easy to say no to everything, or on, if you look this upside down. It's easy to say no. We can't do that. That's not how we do it. That won't work here in Gallatin Valley. That won't work in Missoula. That won't work. It's a lot harder to say yes. And the need is for us to embrace, yes, let's look at it. Let's figure out how we can do that and accomplish our goals. Because if we look at saying yes more often as leaders, that means we're probably going to be empowering another generation in our system. We're going to be empowering what we do to our people. Just double checking time. How many have been in the fire service for 20 years? 30 years? Okay, let's go backwards. Let's go 20 to 10 years. 20 to 5 years? 5 years in service? Okay. Raise your hand proud. You guys are proud of it. Of the people that have been in the fire service for 30 years, how many times has CPR changed? Okay. Of those times that you had to recertify and it changed again, did any of you balk and say, hell no, I'm not doing that? Why not? Doug, why not? Why didn't we balk? Why didn't we say, that's BS, that doesn't work here in North Carolina or South Carolina? Yeah? It's accepted. Have any of you read the research about CPR? Some sickle probably has. Tom, you had at night reading or something. Somebody's crazy and they've read it, right? But what does the fire service actually do? We just accept it, right? Because are we truly the experts in the medical industry? We're just a team player in the medical industry. Does that make sense? We give away our authority to medical directors and doctors and that type of stuff, and we trust them to advise us to do what we are supposed to do in the field. Anybody heard of this little group called Underwriters Laboratory Fire Research Safety? I can't remember it now. UL FSRS. Anybody ever heard of UL's research? Anybody go through their online programs and training? Anybody ever go, that's BS, that won't work here in Missoula? Literally, I hear people say that. That research is from a research lab and it's not going to work here. Why? It's change. Anybody doing any door control, flow path control? Anybody doing anything with water droplets or transitional attack? Anybody doing anything with hanging door curtains? Calgary, you're a sick person. They will run you out of some towns if you start talking about that stuff. Anybody of you are piercing? Who's got a piercing nozzle on their apparatus? When was the last time you pulled it on a scene and used it? How are you? Chief Babbitt. Most piercing nozzles are found where on their apparatus? The highest place in the back, behind everything. How many of you respond with more than 6 people on an incident, on initial call-up? Cheyenne Fire or Great Falls Firewood, sometimes I get confused. I forget what state I'm in. Great Falls Firewood, Missoula would, some of the other Billings would. How many else do? What department? Red Lodge. Was 6 on the original call? That's pretty awesome. That's very good. How many get 8? Chief, how many does it take to do interior operations with vertical ventilation? Minimum number of people? Okay. How many of us do that in the state? So why wouldn't we be embracing new technology, new designs, new tactics, new equipment that augments or supports our initial attack if we respond with 6 or 8 people or less? Why don't we do it? We don't do it. We've never done it that way. Is there also a fear of not knowing what we're doing? Is there a fear that that's not going to work here? Is there a fear that if we screw it up, we're going to get blamed? Is there a fear that because we do it differently than the neighbors that we're going to get chastised by them? All those pieces, right? That's traditions. That's our tradition. That's what we always do. To move past tradition, we have to be able to have the courage to change. What happens during a tactical consideration when we secure the airflow or the flow path? What happens when we shut the door on a compartment that hasn't self-vented yet? What happens to the fire? Chris Dahlhauser knows the answer. It goes out, right? Weird. So if we control the air, we can do that. How many of you still open up houses, break windows, leave doors open as you're getting set up? These are all little traditions that we have to alleviate. So I'm going to make a list. So Rich, do you have handwriting? Can you write? I just want us to have a little bit of a list here going. This is where the participation comes in. I have 2 pieces of paper. I don't want you to expect you to read this. This is just for us to list out. Traditions versus values. Because sometimes we get confused with what traditions are. So what I'd like to know is, what traditions does your fire department have that you're proud of? Chief Aldo, you want to start us off? What tradition do you guys have? What's that? Okay. Sign in the table. What does that do for your members? Okay. What other traditions do we have in the fire service? Food. Doug Klein says food. Like that one. What other traditions? Red fire trucks? Cool helmets? Any other good traditions that you have? Okay, let's switch it. What tactics do we have that are traditions of the fire service? Oh, come on. I know it's early. Interior operations, okay? Stretching a hose line. Do we do that with a hose line or without? For most of you. If we're going interior for search or if we're going interior for fire attack, do we do them simultaneously in our neighborhoods or do we do them separate with separate crews? Simultaneously. Okay, that's cool. Some organizations do it separate, right? They have a search crew and they have a extinguishment crew. Okay. What else do we have as a tradition in the fire service that we let go or can't let go of? What type of ventilation? Vertical ventilation. Okay? Why can't we let go of that one? Is there a time and place for vertical ventilation? Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. We shouldn't be throwing the baby out with the bathwater, right? That old saying. We should be embracing the fact that it doesn't work on every single call. Okay? So vertical ventilation. Any other tactical traditions that we do? Okay? Let's deviate for a second. When did vertical ventilation become popular in the United States Fire Service for single-family residential structures? You think in the 1800s, the 1900s, 1950s? When do you think? Who said 70s? And who was the guy that kind of introduced it? Do you remember? Very good. The Washington guy gets it. Mittendorf endorsed it and didn't invent it, but he published it in the 70s. So is that an old tradition or a new tradition? Easy. I'm a 70s kid. I'm not that old. What is this about old this week, right? That's an inside joke. Tom was there. 70s. Do you think when Mittendorf introduced vertical ventilation, there were people that said, what? He's crazy. That's never going to work in my community. Now we can't get it out of our system, right? Okay, let's stand there. Rich, you can sit for now. I know you're tired from last night. Who developed the Halligan? Halligan himself, right? What years? Anybody know decades? 50s, 60s. So, do you think when Hugh Halligan developed the Halligan tool, somebody said, that's BS. That thing's never going to work. That's a gadget. How many of you have multiple Halligans on your apparatus? How come we embrace those things, but we fail to embrace what's new today? Okay, let's go to the next step. Electric fire apparatus. Chuckle, 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 right? Huh. Do you think, what's wrong with electric fire apparatus today? Why are we slow to embrace that? What's that? It's new. Don't understand it. Okay? Is it the future? Some form or function of it's probably the future, right? Whether it's hybrid or whatever. What do you think they said when we went from horses to mechanized fire apparatus? Huh. So if we're looking at change and we're looking at tradition, the fire service has changed. But we want to drag our heels on stuff. How many of you are using electric hydraulic tools today? What'd that transition look like? How many of you kept the hosed power head and traditional hydraulic tool on your apparatus, even though you got electric ones? I did. We were an early adopter. We switched my first year there. You know what I told the guys as we switched? We better keep those hosed ones on because why? I didn't trust it at all. You know how many times we pulled them the first 5 years? Absolutely never. It took us 5 years, the second generation of electric tools that we bought, to say we don't need to devote the space to this anymore. How many are using electric hand tools, chainsaws, K12s, etc.? We went through the same transition. We put electric chainsaws on our structure engines for vent. We put electric K12s on there for vent and cutting and opening and those things. Guess where we put the gas ones? No, we were smarter this time. We were advanced. We put them up in the upper compartments just in case we needed them. You know how many times we pulled the gas ones out other than truck check every morning? Never once.
Change takes time. You don't just arbitrarily jump out there and jump on the latest, greatest.
Right. It could, right? I haven't been bitten yet. So it's an interesting thing. It's due. Probability is going to come that something's going to fail, right? Yep. Agree with you. But if we don't have early adopters out there testing it and trying it and progressing, how do we change? We talked about this during emerging leadership, that today's folks, and I'm not even going to say generational, because I'm just going to say folks, because there are people that are millennials that also don't know how to start a chainsaw. We get volunteers and they've never ran a power tool or a gas power tool. They don't know how to start a chainsaw. It's great. Can they start an electric one though? Yeah. Which is a little scary thought too, because they probably don't know how to operate, but I digress. The point is, we as leaders, we as captains, battalion chiefs, division chiefs, are the roadblock to change many times because of our lack of confidence in it, because we think it's going to fail us. Just like the Sears executive saying, that's not going to work, that fad's going to go away. We become the roadblock because of our lack of knowledge of it, why we shouldn't do vertical vent on every fire, but in certain cases it's the right thing. We become the roadblock because of our own traditions. Okay? So we have to address ourselves. And I said this a couple years ago when I was here. If we're not willing to change as leaders, we're going to die. We're going to crumble and fall apart in your local community because of our inability to adjust our traditions and carry traditions forward to meet the needs of our customers as we grow into the future. Now, let's think about this for a second. We got a little bit of traditions up here. Rich, I'm going to call you back up. You did such a wonderful job, Vanna. That was perfect. We have 14 minutes left. What values do we look for in the fire service? What values do you look for in your personnel? What values do you look for as a fire department? What values do you look to serve to your community? Honor, integrity, excellence, respect. Rich, are you getting all these? Respect, integrity, honor. What else? Dedication, selflessness. Good to see you. I talked about you a second ago. Okay. Selflessness. Those are accountability. How do we teach that? How do we teach those values? Model. How do we know if we're being effective with teaching those values? Who said that? That's blasphemy. They should have learned that stuff from their parents growing up. Every one of those should have been brought up during their life, right? Leadership is right. Leadership. Think about that. Okay? So we want our folks to demonstrate honor and integrity and respect and all that. What's our system for grading that or performance with each other or within our community? How do we know they're doing it right? Okay, so we can judge that by the support financially somewhat and also emotionally from our communities, right? Okay? What scorecard, Rich, you can sit down again, thank you. What scorecard do we use when we play golf? And what is it? It's par. Par. Now, par means something different in the fire service, especially in Montana, right? Okay, we get that. But every hole has a par. What is that? What does that represent? The average of what it takes to accomplish a meaningful score on that hole. How do we know in the fire service if we're accomplishing par, not personal accountability report, but how do we know if we are scoring ourselves to meet the needs of not the whole, but our customer? They're not bitching at us. Okay? Okay? What percentage of your community calls 911 and asks for service from the fire department? 10% or less. So if 10% or less call us, what mechanism do they have to judge us? That's pretty good. Well, Red Lodge is not a safe place to live then, because that, good God. Right, I would be too. Okay? If we burned down a house because there's a bad fire, we did something wrong, which we don't like to admit, our tactics weren't effective, and we burned that house down, what's the public say? What do they usually deliver the next day to you? What are we doing inside our firehouses? What's our excuse that that house burnt down? A bad fire. Man, we just couldn't get ahead of that one. We make every excuse in the book. Okay? Tom, on your survey, how did you do that? Oh, that WW thing? Yeah. Okay. Okay. And you got, what percentage of your community responded?
It was actually fairly high.
Okay.
With thousands of response. We did it countywide, so 10,000 population, so we were in the thousands.
Okay. Anybody else send out surveys to their community to find out their performance, to see if they met their expectations? Why not? If we want to honor a tradition, and we said that having those values and having our traditions was important to us, how do we know that they're being effective? How do we follow up with community members to find out if we met their service requirement needs, just like Amazon did when they changed their delivery model? My point is, most of us in the fire service, when we look at tradition and we look at leading change, one, we're afraid of change because we don't know what it is. We don't know how to handle new things. Two, we don't really know how to score and grade ourselves to determine, do we need to change? Most of us use some data, and we're better at getting data, and we need to be better in the future. But most of us use a little data called how many calls we run a year, right? If you go to visit a fire department, what's one of the first questions that you ask that fire department, or that someone asks your fire department when you arrive? How many calls do you run a year? Is that an indicator of success for us? Because really, if you think about it, it's an indicator of failure. Failure on prevention, failure on mitigation, failure on all these other pieces. Standards and codes, those are all failures of us. But we use call volume to be our scorecard. And that's not accurate. The second scorecard that we use, shoot times, how fast we get out the door, how fast we get on scene. Where did those numbers come from? Where did 5-minute response time come from? But where's the data to support? There is, but where's the data to support that? Or are we just follow that blindly because we think that's going to help us get staffing, it's going to help us get more stations, it's going to help us with all these other things? We haven't done a great job of identifying how to grade ourselves. And if we can't grade ourselves on performance, now CPSE and other things provide avenues for us to be able to look internally at us. ISO, I would argue, is not maybe effective today in that. But if we don't have a mechanism for scorecards, really all we're doing is checking a box. Now think about that for a second. How many of you started cancer prevention stuff in your organizations? We checked a box, right? How many of you have mental health programs for your organizations? How many of you started doing any one of the plethora of social or mental behavior things along with cancer screening in your organizations? I want to go work for Doug Klein. Most of us checked a box. Yep, we did that now. It's over with. We moved on to the next topic. Yep, did that one. But we really truly didn't build it into a cube that's sustainable with volume and foundational principles to be everlasting. And that's what change needs to be. Because change, if we're just checking a box, it's going to wither away. And I will tell you that my organization failed at this. We were early adopters of cancer prevention. We started wearing N95s. We started wearing nitrile gloves when we did cleaning of our apparatus, when we cleaned our hose. We had SCBA cleaners and scrubbers. We were doing the Nomex hood swap out. We were getting 2 sets of gear. We were doing everything we could to do that. But yet, what do I see our guys do at the burn building? How do they clean out the burn building the next day? Nothing. A designated adult has to go in there and say, put your N95 on at least. At least we can keep the particulates out. I don't know if it's helping or not. But we checked a box. We did all these things. We ordered all this equipment. We have decon kits on our rigs. We checked a box, but we didn't build it for volume to be sustainable. So when we look at honoring tradition, not only do we have to increase our traditions and carry them forward, but we also have to build new traditions that are sustainable for the future. Does that make sense? And so we have to deviate from just checking boxes and start building cubes. Cube has volume, cube has foundation, cube withstands time a lot better. So, I'm going to wrap up here. Why did Amazon succeed and why did Sears fail? What's that? Adaptability. What does that stem from? Change. And the willingness to change by who? Leadership. Every problem we have, every challenge we have, whether it's financial, whether it's recruitment, retention, whether it's mental health, whether it's all of these issues, comes down to one thing: leadership. Not just leadership from the fire chief, leadership through the system. Because without leadership through the system, we don't get something that's solid, that's going to carry forward, that's going to allow us to be successful into the future. If you're struggling with recruitment and retention in your organization, you ought to turn your eyes inside before you try to solve it outside. You have to say, why don't people want to participate with our organization? Why don't people want to be a part of us? Because guess what? They're volunteering in your community or they're participating in their community, but they're at the animal shelter, they're at the church, they're at the Kiwanis, they're at Knights of Columbus, they're at some other organization. And why? Because they found an environment that allowed them to be who they are in that organization. I've been a fire chief. My bio is a little outdated. I took over Gore Hill Fire in 2003. I've been a fire chief since then, so that's 21 years, give or take. People ask me a lot, what do you do for a living? And I say I'm in the people business. That's a senior moment. Because I'm not in the people business, right? I'm a fire chief. But when I say I'm in the people business and I tell our members and my board we're in the people business, what message does that say to them? What's that? They matter. Because don't I as a leader lead people? And don't you as a fire chief, assistant chief, division chief, firefighter serve our community, which is made up of people? We get hung up on all the stuff in the room next door, and we hung up on those traditional items. We call it stuff, but we forget about one important piece: people. So, in closing, it's important for us to honor our tradition. It's important for us to carry those traditions forward. Some of them we have to let go of. Some of them we have to keep going with. But more important, we need to focus on those values. We have to lead those values in our members, in our staff. We have to empower them to think. We have to empower them to understand why. We have to provide them opportunities of growth. We have to give away ownership to them while still maintaining operational control of the organization. It doesn't change our mission, but we have to give it away to them so that way they can lead us into the future. We have Allie and Sophie here and Kate and Jordan. They're the future. Noah and Joe, and they're the future. And if we hold it like this as leadership in our organization, they're not going to grow. They're not going to know the traditions. They're going to create new traditions for themselves without knowing them. So we teach them what traditions are important. And they're not going to be able to grow into the future. So with that, thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm proud to have some connection to the Montana Fire Service. And I'll tell you that the Emerging Leadership Program on Tuesday, if you have an opportunity to send somebody to that next year, it was outstanding, and it shows that the future of the Montana Fire Service is really in good hands in the future, because there are bright, bright individuals coming up through the ranks that we have to empower and grow. So with that, any questions for me at all before I sign off? Chief Caughey? Thank you. Thanks for allowing me to be here, y'all.